Omaha's news leader, chronicling the stories and people making a difference in our community. This is KETV Newswatch 7's Chronicle.
Hey, good morning, I'm Rob McCartney. The November election's just 3 days away. We spent the past 2 months focusing on this top statewide races, part of our year-long commitment to covering the issues and the candidates running in 2018. This morning, we're talking with the final candidate in our series. Democratic State Senator Bob Krist is challenging Republican incumbent Governor Pete Ricketts. Both want to run the state of Nebraska for the next 4 years. We talked with Governor Ricketts last week, and joining us this morning is State Senator Bob Krist. Thanks very much for being here.
Thank you.
All right, so you can see the end of the finish line from here. Any big surprises in the race?
No, I think 15 months we've been traveling around the state, and from the very beginning, we knew what the issues were. They were property taxes, they were proper funding of education, they were a challenge in order to raise enough money to run against a billionaire, and they were obviously trying to find the right person to run with me as a lieutenant governor, and so all those things came together, and I'm pretty happy with where we are.
Okay, let's talk your family. You're married, you have 2 adult children, you have a grandson, right?
Right.
And you have one of your daughter has special needs.
Right.
How has that impacted your stance on issues that you've gone through?
It not only sensitizes you to people of special needs, but it also makes you aware of the needs of people and the services that government need to provide. We have been very fortunate with our daughter, and we have been surrounded by families, the families of special needs people, and it's kind of a unique position to be in. Courtney's taught me more about life than anybody else ever could. She's pretty special in our eyes. And
she actually, because of her, you got into Madonna, right? Tell
Exactly.
me a little about that.
Well, there was a very special nun who started Madonna years ago, Sister Mary Evangeline, and when Sister Mary asked you to do something, you couldn't say no. So I started on the board just in a normal service capacity, and then became the president after a time. It was a wonderful relationship with the board, and we did a lot for the Omaha community, I think, providing an alternative special needs service, and that also taught me about the Department of Health and Human Services. I would learn much more later, but that exposure and that education was critical.
Okay. All right, let's talk about some of the issues. What do you see as the most pressing issue facing Nebraska right now?
Property taxes.
Okay.
We're at an unsustainable rise. We have been all over the state, and we hear from everyone a concern from farmers and ranchers especially that they can't hand their legacy, their farm or ranch, down to their family. That unsustainable rate of property taxes, along with the commodity prices, along with the tariffs, have put them in a very bad situation. And if we don't do something to fund our education process, we will not relieve that burden on the property taxes. Confirmation just within this past week that our plan, our platform, which we were laser focused on, is correct. Platt Institute has come out with a study that shows that what we've been trying to talk about and what farmers and ranchers have been talking to us about is indeed a correction moving forward. So reaffirmation that we're on the right track.
Okay, now we're going to get into that, but I want to mention that Nebraska Economic Forecasting Advisory Board predicts the state's not going to take in as much tax revenues next year as it does historically, actually over the next 2 years. About $9.9 billion over the budget cycle. Some may applaud that. They may say, hey, great, we're not taking in more taxes. Could leave an estimated $232 million shortfall in the next budget. Your estimation, what should Nebraska do facing this latest report?
Well, the first thing we need to do is put an E-clause on that bill that would allow us to collect internet sales tax, which we should have done in 2017.
An emergency clause.
The emergency clause, right, E-clause, I'm sorry. And it basically will speed up that process so we can start collecting as soon as possible. That's not going to solve all of our problems, but we do need to look at revenue sources that are out there. The tax giveaways, the tax loopholes, we need to look at all of those things and make sure that we have the most revenue coming in. It is a balancing act between the services that are required, the funding that needs to be provided, and also the revenues that the state sees. But and honestly, in the last 3 or 4 years, our economy has not been that bad. I saw 2008 through 9, 10, 2009 being my first year when we had to go into special session and cut $1 billion out of the budget. Those were rainy days. This past 4 years, we've taken money out of the rainy day fund we should have never taken out. So it will be a challenge, there's no question. Not only do we have to put money back into that rainy day fund and start saving for another downturn if there is, we also have to balance what we have. And I'm hoping that we don't have to take any more out of this current budget. But my proposal in going into this thing is that we're going to start doing a joint budget process. I will do a joint budget process with the legislature. We'll sit down on November 7th, 8th, 9th, whenever I can gather those colleagues together and say, what are the priorities for 1.9 million people across the state? It's been my experience in 10 years in the legislature that there's been a cross purpose. When a governor finds his priorities and a legislative body find theirs, it'll be the first step in building consensus moving forward.
As opposed to the governor now just going back into an office, coming up with a budget, sending it to the legislature. That's how it's always been done.
Right.
How do you think that'll work any better?
Well, there's no constitutional requirement for us to do it separately. In fact, we have a duplication of staff that by itself is a redundancy that should be looked at, and I will look at it. But coming together in a consensus and building that budget, then we don't have to start arguing that first week. We can start actually solving problems for the people in the state.
You often reference the three-legged stool, our funding sources for Nebraska, property, income, sales taxes. The legs, you say, need to be better balanced. How can you do that without raising taxes? Lengthening one of the legs, if you will.
Sure. Well, that's a great question. And I think it's prioritization of the money that we bring in, first of all. I'm not unwilling to talk about a tax increase at some point down the road, but the first thing we actually need to do is to make sure that we're taking, for example, we took 20% out of our income tax in the past and put it towards education. In that 2009-10 timeframe, we took that 20% away. That created a burden on the property taxpayer to make up for that difference. And the state level also took away our special education money for education of special needs. We reduced it from 80% to 50%. That needs to be reprioritized and put back where it needs to be. Will we have to adjust taxes? I think that's what we looked at last year in 5 bills that were in the Revenue Committee that never made it out for discussion. They need to come out of there. Senator Breese, Senator Friesen, and others have had wonderful ideas. They've had ideas that have been founded by Fair Nebraska, a group that met in the entire interim period and the last interim period. Nebraskans for property tax relief. Those ideas have been out there and they have been talking about them. We need to talk about them in the legislative process and together with the executive branch come to a conclusion.
State aid to schools, you mentioned it, took a huge hit, obviously went away from many. Some say that it may come back a little bit in the next budget just because, depending of course on what the financial situation turns out. Where do you want that level to be, state aid for schools?
I want to start looking at increasing K through 12 formulas, as in the TIOSA formula, which currently funds our school system, predominantly the majority of our school system. But I also think that, again, there were several bills that discussed moving to a different kind of funding formula, and we've heard that all over the state. The current formula creates a have and have not relationship out there. We need to look at it and make sure that we're doing the right thing. I believe we can 100% fund our educational needs, but it won't be without the help of the counties and the school boards coming to the table.
All right. Moving on, Nebraska businesses are frustrated a bit because there is a shortage of skilled workers out there. I mean, it could be a good problem to have, some may say. It's still a problem. What's your solution?
Well, I think we should let credit be where credit is due. We have community colleges across the state that are developing dual credit programs with the high schools. They are educating and creating an atmosphere where our young folks are looking at opportunities to get into technical fields and trades, creating an opportunity to get a well-paid job from the very beginning and reduce the possibility of debt going to a 4-year institution. We don't need, every child does not need to be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. Some of them need to be electricians, and that internally will grow Nebraska in terms of our technical trades and our needs.
One of the things you mentioned kind of is the debt. The state of Maine actually, about 10 years ago, they came up with a program where basically they would have a tax credit program for people who lived in Maine, college students who are paying off college debt. Now they're expanding that to anyone who has college loan. Please move to Maine. We'll help pay off your college debt. Something like that work for Nebraska? It
is working for Nebraska now. I've been in the legislature for 10 years, and we have for medical professionals a program that forgives debt for your education. We need to expand that. We've been talking about it for years, just have not gotten into the right spot to do it. So yes, it needs to be part of the discussion, and we need to continue to do what we're already doing.
Yeah, those are more, correct me if I'm wrong, but more for rural areas and places where you are underserved. I'm talking in general, just so you can get skilled workers in Omaha and Lincoln. And
there's no magic to that formula. They can be used for any place in the state that needs those kind of skilled laborers or professional laborers. So we could expand the program tremendously.
Right, Governor Ricketts repeatedly touts Nebraska leads the nation in economic development per capita, the Governor's Cup, he calls it. We have third highest wage growth, sixth lowest unemployment in the country. How do you fight those stats?
I don't think I have to fight those stats. I think taking over, I've changed commands in the Air Force several times, and the person who came before me did good and sometimes not so good. So let's move forward with wherever we think we are in good stead. The problem is the governor has not led on several issues that I believe I've been very clear within this campaign structure. If we can't solve property taxes, we're not going to be able to keep people here and grow Nebraska, as he refers to it, from within. Look what happened when we offered Conagra the opportunity to come here. They're here. We invent every possible loophole to keep them here. They're gone to a higher price tax state. Look what happened with Cabela's for different reasons, but similar. So let's start trying to grow, as he says, grow Nebraska. Let's start looking at the things that we're doing well and move on. We've got a lot of problems in the state, a lot of issues that need to be solved, and he's failed on some of those issues.
One of those issues, corrections. You've said that you'd get rid of Scott Frakes, remove him as director right away. You've also said you declare an emergency because of the deadly disturbances, overcrowding, understaffing. Did the state cut too deeply here in the budget? Do we not put enough money here? What was the onset of this problem, and who's to blame?
Well, we could blame past governors, we could blame past correction directors, we could blame a lot of people, but that's not going to solve the problem. The problem needs to be solved with something more than what the governor would describe as a culture change. Culture change to me means that leadership can't make the changes they need to, so they're blaming it on the people or the culture. That's not where the blame needs to be. Scott has not been very effective in changing, by leadership, changing the factors that are influencing our correction system. We have a 30% attrition rate in our corrections officers. They're leaving. Try to run a business with 1/3 of your employees leaving every year and retraining. We've had more riotous activities, incidents, accidents, deaths, and murders in our correction system in the past 4 years under Governor Ricketts and Scott's reign than we've had in the previous 30 years. So there needs to be a leadership change, and yes, unless Scott can convince me that the governor was the one who was holding him back from doing his job. But remember, I sat on every one of those special investigative committees. I sat in Judiciary for the Judiciary Committee for the last 6 years, and all I've heard is blame and deflect, blame and deflect. We need to act. There needs to be leadership.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to talk things like lethal injection, death penalty, Medicaid expansion. You're watching KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle. This is a special commitment 2018 edition of KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle. Joining me this morning, Democrat gubernatorial candidate, State Senator Bob Criss. We talked about corrections. In August, Nebraska carried out its first lethal injection in 21 years. Would you overturn capital punishment?
I voted to get rid of capital punishment, and I also voted to override the veto when the governor tried to bring it back himself. I would be sworn in duty, and I will take that oath when I become governor, to uphold the laws of the state of Nebraska the same way I did in the Air Force to defend this state against all enemies, foreign and domestic. However, I do think that as a conservative, we need to look at what we're doing in this state. If we need to continue with the death penalty, then it should be transparent. Not buying the drugs off a back alley in India or inventing a concoction to kill someone. It needs to be completely transparent in moving forward. I'm very concerned about that 14-minute execution and the time when the blinds went up and down I just I have a bad feeling about moving forward in that way.
You support expanding Medicaid. We've talked about this before.
Right.
Before. Initiative 427 provides for expansion of Medicaid in Nebraska. That has failed in the legislature 6 times. Why would now be any different?
Well, first of all, this will be the will of the people.
Okay.
This is the vote, and I've always voted to put any constitutional requirement or these kinds of things onto the ballot because I think the will of the people is very important. So this one will tell us that they want to do this. As the state of Maine did. Now, it should go on notice that I'm the only candidate for governor who said I would move forward to enable Medicaid expansion. And I would point out that the governor's wrong on this issue, as are the critics. This is not designed to take the person who's sitting on the couch and keep them on the couch. You have to actually work in order to participate in this 90-10 split. And I would remind people that the reason I support it is that we have 90,000 people in the state that are uninsured, and 30,000 of those are my fellow veterans. And I think we can do better to provide care for them. I also think that we need to look at those small hospitals all over the state whose business plan rides strictly on whether or not they receive Medicaid in some cases. This is going to do nothing but help our small rural hospitals stay in business and thrive, and that's important for our urban areas and rural areas.
You have 2 of the state's largest newspapers, the World Herald, Journal-Star, both supported expansion. The governor, though, says if 427's passed, the money's going to have to come from somewhere. It'll affect every department. Do you agree with that?
No, and here's why. We have a state medical system where we are spending 100 pennies on the dollar providing services, Medicaid services to people. This would put 90 cents on the dollar funded by taxes that we paid to the federal government. It has to be a judicious use. It has to be a smart use, and I would do that. I don't think that we're going to be looking at a bank breaker. Remember, there's 33 other states in the District of Columbia that have already figured this out. So we just don't need to reinvent the wheel. We need to look at what's working. And by the way, of those 33 states, about half of them are Democrat and Republican governors. So it works no matter what party you are.
University of Nebraska system has been forced to make some pretty big cuts. Chancellor Jeffrey Gold oversees UNMC and UNO, made this statement to us. He says, if we do anything to erode either the quality or the perception of quality of what we're doing, that will determine a fate far worse than any reduction in the budget. Have we already cut too deep, in your opinion?
We're close. We're close. Okay. I've talked to President Bounds and President Gold, or Chancellor Gold, and I think in both cases they believe that one more serious cut in this way will degrade their capability of building the institution. And I think we have some of the best leadership in the university system, college system we've ever had. Remember, I've been there for 10 years and I've watched people float in and out, and I think these gentlemen have their collective stuff together and know how to move forward. Remember also that what we have done in this budget process is we've added another $3,500 onto the cost of getting an education for a 4-year student at the university. That's unconscionable in my mind. So we need to go back and do it. Now, I have had conversations with the president and said, you know, when we restore that money, that tuition has to come down. And I will hold him to that, as I've said, and the regents. So.
All right, let's take a turn literally. Our infrastructure, our roads, what would you do to fix those? I mean, everybody complains about these.
Well, let's take just in specific the 4-lane project that we started in the mid-90s, and it was supposed to have been done in 2003. It was supposed to cost us $500 million. It's now not supposed to be completed until 2033 at a cost of $2.5 billion. And the reason for that is we start construction, we stop, we start, we stop, and the increase in construction cost is going up 3 to 5%. That commission has consistently asked both Governor Ricketts and Governor Heineman for the ability to bond, to build roads. I support that effort, and I think that bonding at 1.25 or 1.5% keeps people working, keeps those roads being built, and we don't have to take money out of our general funds in order to fund those road projects. Not only that, it's a safety issue.
Iowa, last legislative session, passed one of the most restrictive abortion bills in the country, banning abortions if a fetal heartbeat is detected. That's currently being challenged in court. Do you foresee something like that in Nebraska? No,
I won't support any further restriction than the 20-week law that currently exists. I think that we've seen other states try to do that, and I believe it's a constitutional issue. And I feel very strongly about supporting defending and following the letter of the law in the Constitution, both the United States and the state of Nebraska. And I think that we've deterred from that in this administration, not paying attention to what the Constitution tells us to do.
All right, in your campaign ads, you pledged to, and I want to read this, restore leadership and hardworking Nebraska values. So the question is, in your opinion, what are Nebraska values? And if we're restoring them, are you saying Governor Ricketts doesn't share those same values?
I do. I don't think that Governor Ricketts understands what it is to go from paycheck to paycheck. I don't think that he understands what our people are telling us, what they've told me, what the citizens have told me of this state. They're not customers. This is not business. They are people who sometimes need services from the state. You have to have some compassion sometimes to lead, and I think that I don't believe he understands that.
But if you look at, he always promotes the business side of it and says a lot of people do like the business and the numbers do look good, as we pointed out earlier.
Right. Well, thanks for those numbers. We're moving forward. Now we need to pay attention to some things like property tax relief.
And would you do anything to limit access to weapons?
I think we first need to make sure that those laws that are in place that control or pretend to control weapons are enforced on the federal level and on the state level. I don't believe I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment, and everyone has the right, but they also have the responsibility to protect from someone else taking their weapon. So let's start enforcing the laws we have before we ever start talking about getting stricter.
Okay. Well, we're going to be right back with some final thoughts, including why Senator Bob Criss wants your vote this November. First, a reminder, your comments are a very important part of the show. If you want to be heard, email them to news@ketv.com. We love hearing from you, and we'll be right back. This is KETV News Watch 7's Chronicle, and today we've been talking with Democratic State Senator Bob Criss, who wants to be the next governor of Nebraska. And as we do with all our candidates, we're going to give you a minute to make a final push for your voters.
1 minute.
Okay.
Okay, here we go. I've been pleased and privileged to have Senator Lynn Walz with me on this journey, a journey to represent you, 1.9 million people across the state. We will do so with compassion and understanding. We have been traveling about the state, and we have heard your concerns. We brought them back. We intend to form roundtable discussion groups where we will again listen while we're in office. I've spent 21 years in the Air Force serving my country, 10 years in the legislature serving my state. I have served on almost every of the committees in the legislature, and I have dealt with almost every agency in the state of Nebraska. And I can tell you that the 10 years that I have spent is just my preparation or my homework for the final exam. I want your support, and I'm asking you for your vote so I can continue my service to this country and this state. Thank you.
All right. State Senator Criss, thanks very much for being here this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And remember, if you missed any part of the interview, it is online. Just go to our homepage, click on the menu button, look for Chronicle. We have the show we also did with Governor Ricketts there as well. So you also can find the interviews we did with 2nd Congressional candidates for Congress, Don Bacon and Cara Eastman, and the 3 shows we did with Senate candidates, Deb Fischer, Jane Raybould, and Jim Schultz. And don't forget to vote. Polls are open Tuesday from 8 in the morning till 8 at night in Nebraska and Iowa. It's a little bit longer. You can start at 7 a.m. Polls don't close there until 9 p.m. And of course, you can always early vote, which is happening right now. Remember, this is your chance to have a say in our democracy, and you can't complain if you don't vote. I'm Rob McCartney. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here next Sunday morning.